Hey everybody, it's Cole from Cole's Quilts, and in this video I'm going to go over a few tips for troubleshooting your sewing machine if it starts to act crazy. So I teach a number of in-person sewing classes, and often at the end of class, one thing that students will be the most excited about will be some little detail that I've told them about how to fix or adjust something on their sewing machine that wasn't even the point of the class, but they'll be so glad they came to the class because they learned that one thing that helped them. So I'm hoping that this may help you. You may already know all of these, and if you do, you can pat yourself on the back. But maybe you're new to sewing. Or maybe you started sewing, you've been sewing for a while, but no one ever walked you through some of these things. So when I was growing up, we always drove old beater cars. Our cars were breaking up down all the time. That made it so that as an adult, if my car makes a noise, I sort of start to panic and my brain is like, oh no, it's going to break down. It's going to cost so much to repair. And I kind of have that same anxiety with my sewing machine. If I'm sewing along and then all of a sudden the tension starts being weird, or the bobbin starts to nest, or it starts to make a weird noise, I tend to panic and I start thinking, oh no, it's broken. I'm going to have to repair it. It's going to be so expensive. What's going to happen? But what I have found is that if you learned how to troubleshoot, 90% of the time you can figure it out on your own and it's not a big problem. Every once in a while, there may be something where you need to take your machine in to be serviced. And I'm not necessarily even really handy. Like, I'm not talking about fixing the sewing machine. I'm just talking about things that you can check that might be causing a problem that you don't realize can be causing a problem. And I'm going to try to walk you through each one of these things. My first tip is clean out your sewing machine. What do I mean by clean out your sewing machine? Mostly I mean removing the lint. And I'm going to show you how to do this. But first, let me ask you, when's the last time you cleaned the lint out of your sewing machine? How often should you do that? In my opinion, based on my experience, you should be cleaning the lint out of your machine every single time you change your bobbin. You would be surprised how many problems it can cause to have lint in your machine. There are a few do's and don'ts about how to do this. Okay, so let me show you. Okay, we're going to clean the lint out of our machine. The first thing I want to point out is this plate right here. So every machine is going to be different. On this machine, well, first of all, I'm going to move the foot. If you press right here, this plate pops up. Now let's see how much shame I should feel about the amount of lint that I have. Not a ton. So you can use some sort of little brush. And you see how there's some lint in there. Now, some people might think, well, I should get like an air can and blow the lint out. But you actually don't want to do that on a standard sewing machine because it can blow the lint farther into the machine. So the best thing actually is to get a small vacuum. And as I'm brushing, I'm going to take the tip of the vacuum. And that will suck up the lint as I'm brushing it out from in between the feed dogs. The other place we need to check, pop this off. I'm going to look down here where my bobbin is. I'm going to pop my bobbin case out. I'm going to push on this. That's going to pop this open. So you're also going to want to make sure you've cleaned all the lint out from here. And you can also take this part out, make sure you cleaned out all that lint and cleaned the lint off of here. If you have a newer Bernina, that is where you would oil it. I'm going to take this oil and I'm just going to put one drop right here. And that's all you need. Once I've cleaned all that out, I'm going to put this back. I'm going to take the bobbin out real quick. You want to look in the bobbin case and make sure that there isn't lint inside the bobbin case, as well as sometimes these metal pieces where you would wind the thread through can get lint built up in here. If you use a pin, you can sort of slide a pin in there if you see any lint to help get that lint out. The next thing I would do after you've cleaned out your sewing machine and oiled it, which, by the way, you don't necessarily need to oil it every single time you change your bobbin. I do it about every other time I change my bobbin. Some people do it a lot less. Also, I think it depends on the type of sewing machine, but it never hurts to oil it. We've cleaned out the lint. We've oiled our machine. Now it's still not working. What's the next thing you need to do? The next thing I would do is change the needle. So I've sort of collected these tips along the way from different people, and This one I remember was one time when my old machine was just acting crazy and I couldn't figure it out. And I posted something on Reddit and I was like, what do I do? And people had all sorts of suggestions. And someone said, change your needle. And I thought to myself, well, it's not that. I had just put a new needle in. Because, side note, how often should you change your needle? When's the last time you changed your needle? So there are actually recommendations for like how many hours of sewing, but who's keeping track of their hours of sewing? I don't. I tend to change my needle in between each project, at least, depending on how big the project is. But even if you put in a new needle, there could have been some sort of manufactured defect. Like there could be maybe like a tiny little piece of metal on some part of the needle that didn't get shaved off properly, that might be catching on something. And it's amazing what problems that can cause. And so going back to when I read that on Reddit, I thought, I don't need to change the needle. This is a new needle. But I tried everything else. And eventually I was like, well, I guess it doesn't hurt to try. I put in a new needle and it was fine. So when it comes to the needle, not only should you maybe just change out the new needle, but you want to know, are you using the right needle for the job? So you have the size of the needle and you have the point of the needle. Does it work with the fabric that you're using? Does it work for what you're trying to do? And then does it work with the thread? Let's talk about thread next. There are different types of thread, and if you haven't watched it, check out my video about different thread weights and types of thread that you might be using. And you want to make sure the thread you're using works with the needle that you're using. A good rule of thumb to follow is that when you thread your needle, that thread should not take up more than 40% of the eye of the needle. If the thread is filling up pretty much the whole eye of the needle, then it's going to be harder for the thread to move quickly through the eye of the needle, and what can happen is your thread can shred and break. If you are having trouble, maybe try going up a size in the needle. If you're using a heavier, thicker thread, you need a bigger needle, and if you're using a finer thread, you can get away with a smaller needle. Here's some different examples of needles. This one says that it's for denim, and notice the number, whereas these say that they're for quilting. So this says it's a 16 and this says it's a 14. Also, you have the 190. I feel like, I should probably know, but I feel like that's either like US versus European or something like that. For denim, it's going to be a stronger, bigger needle. These quilting needles are slightly smaller, but they're going to have a sharper point. Here's some examples of some universal needles, or Nina needles, but notice these different sizes. And notice that those are all smaller than the denim one, because these are a variety that you probably use for like regular quilting or sewing. And then there are lots of different other types of needles you can get. You can get ones for top stitch, denim, leather, metallic thread, all sorts of stuff. You have cleaned out the lint, you've changed the needle. Another thing you can do is check to see that your machine is threaded properly. Now, the first thing I would do is maybe just look through all the steps you need to go through to thread your machine, which is going to be different with different machines. Make sure it hasn't missed a step. One of the things that used to happen to me a lot with my old machine with certain threads is that as the machine moved with certain silkier threads, the thread would just sort of pop out of different mechanisms that were supposed to be moving the thread up and down. And it would happen when I didn't realize, and then it would jam up the machine. So check to make sure it's threaded properly. However, even if you look and you see that it's threaded properly, but it's still not working, just rethread it. Because there might be part of it that you're not seeing, but there's something off. So just take the thread out, rethread the machine. How you thread your machine will be different with every machine, but they're all pretty similar. So you might have your thread coming from here or right here, but I tend to use cones. So I have this cone holder that I use. So I'm going to take this thread out. I'm going to start again. Okay, so on my machine, many machines are numbered. See this? That shows that's where we start. Here's 2. That means the thread goes through here. Here's 3, because I'm looping the thread under here. So I've done 1, 2, 3, 4. See, when I do this one, it's going into this little metal hook. If 5 is this. This is something that sometimes people just skip and they don't think it's going to make a difference, but it really does. The thread needs to go behind that piece of metal, and also importantly, it needs to go behind this piece of metal. There. If the thread just goes from 3 all the way into the needle, then that's going to mess it up. At this point, I would thread the needle. Luckily, I have this needle threader on my machine, where I just pull that down and threads it for me. So if you've cleaned out the lint, you've changed the needle, you've rethreaded the machine, the next thing you could do is just try a different thread. One thing that some people don't know is that thread can have a shelf life. So if you have thread that's 30, 40, 50 years old, you inherited it from someone, sometimes it will get caught on the needle or it will break or shred. So if you're having trouble with one type of thread, maybe you grab a different one to see if that's better. The next thing I would do is look at your bobbin. This is going to, again, be different with different machines, but it's possible that you could have one, if you just put in a new bobbin, you could have a bobbin that maybe when it was manufactured was a little bent or wonky, and so it's not spinning properly. Or if you're using a machine with metal bobbins, if you've ever dropped the bobbin or something has hit it when it's being stored somewhere, that could affect it. You might be able to look at the bobbin and it might look completely normal, but just for trial and error, just pop that one out, pop a new bobbin in. And if you have multiple bobbin cases, if you're using a machine with a bobbin case, you can do the same thing with a bobbin case. Just switch out your bobbin case. I would also pull out the bobbin and the bobbin case and check to make sure that the bobbin is threaded properly. If you're having tension issues, I'm going to show you real quick how you can adjust the tension. I like to check tension with a zigzag stitch, which on my machine, I would just click on this. On a lot of machines, it's a knob that you would turn. So I'm going to put it on a zigzag and I'm just going to do a few stitches. Now let's do a few straight stitches. Okay, so when you're looking at your tension, what are you looking at? What we are looking at is that the stitches on one side look the same as the stitches on the other side. You have a bobbin thread and you have a top thread, and those two threads should be meeting in the middle. If you have one side that looks like stitches and one side that looks just like thread just sitting on top, that could be a sign that the tension's off. It can be a little hard to tell. So that's why I often like to do a zigzag stitch, because if your tension is off, I feel like it's a little bit more obvious on a zigzag stitch. So for example, on the points, if the tension on this side is too high, you'll see it pulling the thread from the other side. So again, if we look at this and they look the same on both sides, that means your tension is pretty good. A lot of machines have a tension knob, which sometimes it's here, sometimes it's over here. On this newer machine, this is the tension. And you see how it has this picture that's showing the two threads meeting? And so what this looks like, sometimes that's just an actual knob on your machine. You roll it up and down. Sometimes people will obsess about it being on a certain number. And I will tell you, every machine is different. The thread affects it. What you're doing affects it. So don't assume that it should always be at 4 or always be at 3 or always be at 5. Check your tension by doing some stitches and then adjust it and see how it changes as you adjust it. One bonus tip that I want to give you that a lot of people learn quickly, but you may not all know, is that if you're not in the middle of chain piecing, which I am constantly chain piecing. So when you're starting something from scratch, and I put down this fabric that I'm going to stitch, some people will learn almost instinctually that you want to sort of, see these ends of our threads, You want to sort of hold on to the threads when you first start. If you have a sewing machine that cuts the thread, which this machine does, that's this button. So what that does is if I'm done with a section, I can press this button and it cut that thread. Challenge is the length that it cuts it is pretty short. You guys see that bobbin thread peeking out? It's like 1/4 of an inch of thread. In my experience, if you only have that much thread and you're not holding on to it and you go to sew a new piece, that thread is going to get pulled into where the bobbin is and the bobbin's going to nest. And if you've never heard the term bobbin nesting, basically that just means that all the thread's going to knot up underneath and the machine's going to stop. So I'm not saying don't use your thread cutter, but I'm just saying that's something that you do need to think about. So just make sure that you have enough so that when you start, you're sort of holding on to it. So if you've tried all of those troubleshooting steps and your machine still isn't working, that's when you might need to take it in to get serviced. And if you want your machine to last, you should be getting it serviced once a year anyways. Depending on how often you use it. If you're in the Western Washington area, shout out to Quilting Mayhem. They sell machines, they service machines. You can trade in your old machine for a new machine. You can buy refurbished machines from them. They do an awesome job and they will let you know what's going on and give you help with any of this troubleshooting. Also, if you buy a machine from them that's newer, they give you a free class where they walk you through all these things that I'm talking about, even more than this, that you need to know about the machine. I don't work for them, I'm just a big fan. Okay, so if you've tried all those things, you might need to get your machine serviced. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that some of that helped you. If you want to learn more about sewing and quilting and you are new, go to colesquiltsacademy.com and I have a beginner foundation paper piecing online class. I also have a beginner design class and an advanced design class if you want to learn how to design your own foundation paper piecing patterns. If you have a video that you want to see or a class you want offered, please leave a comment or send me an email and let me know. And just so that you know, also, now that I offer quilt kits on my website, I am also offering some select fabrics for sale on my website. So if you need a pattern, if you need a quilt kit, if you need some fabric, please check out colesquilts.com. Let me know what else you guys want to know about sewing, and I will see you later.